Hello, my name is Jackie Karol, the voice of Billiards, live here today talking about sexiness and sexism with Emily, the Billiard Bombshell Duddy.
Cheers. Yeah,
Cheers!
the next best thing to actually being together.
Absolutely. Have you been practicing at home during the quarantine a lot? It looked like I saw a couple posts of you running racks and bank shots and
Yeah. I've been playing a good amount, I would say. I try to practice and like kind of keep it like the variety going so that I don't lose my mind because I'm only really practicing by myself, which the luxury of the pool hall, I get to play with so many different people. But it's been good. I've been doing like a lot of 9-ball ghost, and I'll do the same format the WPBA does, where I do the best of 10 racks and keep score. I have like my chalkboard on the wall, and that's been pretty good. And then doing a lot of banks. I love banking anyway, and that's something that keeps it really fun while I'm playing by myself.
so the topic today is sexiness and sexism in the pool industry.
Ooh, one of my favorite things.
What do you feel like the pool industry's feeling is about it? Do you think they should use sexiness more to promote the sport like they do in other sports?
Yeah, I think it is so complicated.
Yeah.
As I think right now, like with feminine, like over the last few decades, right? It's like feminism and women's rights, and like we've gone through this like kind of roller coaster of of making progress and equality and all these things. But it's like the sexiness part, is confusing, right? Because on one hand, people are like, oh, well, you're just objectifying yourself, and why should you have to do that? And on the other hand, it's very empowering.
Right.
I think too, right? And I've always felt connected to the powerful part of it and not the objectification part. I don't think, like, I'm proud. I'm a woman. I'm feminine. All those things, and you don't have to be like that, right? I feel like we need to get to a place where we recognize that even though a woman is sexy, she's dressing sexy, like she's owning her sexual power. Right. That is not, she's not doing that because of society always. Right. It is tricky. I feel like sometimes women get into this headspace and maybe they are doing it for the wrong reasons. For me, I feel like I am who I am. I'm very proud of that. And there's nothing wrong with wanting to be pretty or wearing makeup or doing these things. I think that in pool, it's been a really tough topic because you have this really strong contingency of women, or let's take the women's tour for example. And there's this thing of like, why should we use sexiness to promote, because not everyone's like that, right? So they're kind of singling out certain women. But we're in America, sex sells. I don't think there's anything wrong with being powerful and sexy, period. So being on tour for 10 years now and being kind of this strong, outspoken woman who embraces her sexiness, I've been met with a lot of support in some ways, and then total non-support, like just kind of criticism, like a love-hate relationship. And I understand it completely, but I think it's really backwards, right? I don't understand it. So I think that we need to support women for who they are, right? Whether they are whatever spectrum of femininity they are, right? Yep. And pool, I think that pool has this kind of intellectual elitist quality to it that is non-productive, right? Of like, well, if you're not a champion or if you haven't won 1 million titles, whatever, then you shouldn't get any recognition, right? Whereas there's a broad spectrum of players, right? And people that are marketable or have personality or that are able to crack into the mainstream should be embraced, I think, and supported. And the sport should really kind of go after those people to represent them, right? I mean, unfortunately, the game is a little heady, you could say, and intellectual, and a lot of the champions are shy, right? They're not social, they're not extroverts. You know, a lot of them don't feel comfortable being in the limelight or being marketed or being on TV or being whatever, and that's all totally great. But if you have a contingency, and especially women that are sexy, you know, or men that are sexy, women, men, sexy, who cares? Like, sex is a part ingrained in human nature, right? Obviously, there's something to it. There's just like, it's in everything we see, it's in advertisements, and it's everywhere. And let's face it, like, it's like, we feel it all the time. It's magnetism, you know, and I think that its sexiness is like the biggest thing about it is the confidence, right? I think just like, you can be attractive, but if you don't have confidence, or if it's not genuine, right? You can have a very beautiful man, woman, whatnot, but if it's like all fake or plastic, they're not going to come off. And then you could have somebody that's not stereotypically attractive be very sexy and attractive because of their confidence and who they are, right?
Yeah.
I think, I think there's so many more people in pool. There's so many more players that are sexy in an untraditional way, that are cool, right? That are badasses, and that people don't know who they are, because and they should. Pool should, like, you know, take those people and have them be like the poster children, like other sports do.
To engage the audience and grow the sport. Just like they do in other sports. I totally agree.
Yeah.
That was a really interesting In a Man's World TV show. What I found really interesting about that, it was you got to experience playing as a man where people perceived you as a man, and what your feeling was with that when.
Yeah. So, you know, just to recap, you know, the project that I did, you know, it was In a Man's World, and it came out on Bravo in the last October. And Viola Davis is one of our exec producers. You know, obviously she's incredible. So honored to represent women in the project and pool players. You know, they had 4 different women in different male-dominated industries. And we each got to go undercover as a man with this Hollywood level, you know, the people that did my transformation won Academy Awards for The Wolfman. And so I got to have this incredible team, voice and movement coaches. And it was like a really like a dream come true to, because I've been playing pool my whole life, you know, and I've been in the game my whole life. And, you know, from a young age, I got extra attention, I feel like, because of being feminine, a woman in pool, right, in a man's world, also feminine. And I refused to kind of, you know, hide my femininity or like disconnect from who I was, or kind of like body shame myself, which I don't say all women do, but I feel like women in a very intimidating world, like a man's world, I feel sometimes do kind of shy away from maybe being feminine or being that way because it's uncomfortable, right? So they maybe go a different direction. But regardless, for me to be able to, after 35 years on this planet, to be able to see what the other side was like was amazing. So, you know, we did a thing where I played it pool as Emily, and I got a lot of criticism and bullshit, like I usually do. I don't know if I can swear, but I got a lot of crap and shit talking. And not, of course, not every guy is a chauvinist pig, okay? But there are a lot of not so good guys out there that, and they, you know, or good guys that are just old school. They don't realize how they talk to women, right? They don't realize how they treat us because we're in their space, right? I feel like the biggest thing it showed me was that, you know, when it's only men, right? It's like the boys club. Men, of course, act differently. They're more comfortable. So I think a woman coming into this like old school boys club, which is pool has been for a long time, makes that all of a sudden like they have to behave differently, right? They can't maybe be like, they feel like they can't. Although a lot of women, we don't care if they swear or they want to be dudes, right? It's just a natural thing.
Right.
So when I was Alex McCabe was my alter ego that I played on the show. And, you know, Jen and Jackie were, you know, my accomplices to pull it off. They left at one point and it was just me and all the guys. And I swear to God, it was like the energy totally transformed, changed. Like they all deflated, you know, it was like they were all like peacocked up and like, you know, trying to be like these cool, like, extra masculine, you know, people because in front of the girls, you know, like, oh, I'm the best, whatever. And then it was like they didn't give a shit, like all this, you know, and they were like just the way they were acting was totally different when the women weren't around. Right. And I could see women doing that. We're kind of like that too when it's just the girls. Of course, right? We might act a different way. So I got the insider's view. and you know, it was very enlightening. It was a very special experience. Because I kind of also realized that we're all just humans. We're all just animals. You know, we're not really thinking a lot. Like a lot of the time we're not conscious about how we behave, what we're saying to other people, what we're doing. So much of it comes from this like automatic place. Yeah. So if you were raised a certain way around guys in pool halls and you're like that dude, then you don't realize you're being a dirtbag, right? So I think that's the biggest thing is just awareness, right? Making people self-aware. I became more self-aware of who I am, why I do things, you know, just started to analyze and realize that a lot of the guys that have been jerks to me over the years were probably not the worst guys. They just were absent, were not paying attention, right? Or didn't know how to act. Yeah. Right? All of a sudden it's like 30 dudes in the room and like I walk in and I'm strutting around and kick everyone's ass. Like they just might be like, whoa, like sensory overload. And how do I treat you? Do I treat you like a bro? Do I treat you like woman? Do I hit on you? Because my whole life for 20 years, you know, my favorite thing is to go into a dive bar. I mean, I love being a professional and traveling all over the world, but like I am still that woman, that woman that would walk into a dive bar and just, my goal is to dominate all night, right? Maybe lose a game, right? Win drinks, win money, but more so just show like a woman doing that, like owning the room, being dominant, is important, right? For women to be able to do, but it doesn't happen very often. So I got this like kind of big picture view doing the TV show. Mm-hmm. It was like, whoa, like I realized so much more about my life, about the guys in it, about my experiences. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was very cool.
That's really neat. Very cool experience. Don't you feel like sometimes like if you're dressed sexy, almost in some people's eyes, whether it's fair or not, right, is like it almost discredits you or they don't expect it. It's like, well, if you are good looking, there's no way that you could be good at pool or know much about pool. Just kind of in life too. You're almost like judged a little bit for it with some people. You know what I mean?
It's very, yeah, I agree. I mean, I feel like there's such a high like value to being attractive, which I don't necessarily agree with, right? I think that it should be more about who you are, but that if you have that commodity that you're like not supposed to be smart or not supposed to be good at things, or like you just have to be pretty, just like shut up and be pretty, right? Whereas that's absurd, obviously, like, you know, because humans are, you know, and I think back to, you know, starlets like Hedy Lamarr, for example, you know, is like this gorgeous bombshell who was typecast in all of these roles as this kind of like sexy seductress, but she was totally brilliant. She created the technology that is responsible for Wi-Fi and Bluetooth. And she literally took it to the military to patent it, and they stole her patent. This is all in the movie, like Billiard Bombshell story. But she was like, after the fact, and like when she was like older and later in life, was actually given the credit and put into the Inventors Hall of Fame. But when she was young, it was like, listen, you know, pretty bombshell actress, like, okay, that's great, but whatever. And then they just like took the technology because it was amazing, and that's why we have all of these things. You know, Marilyn Monroe was brilliant. Not a lot of people know that. You know, and she had to play a lot of the times these ditzy blonde roles because that's where her personality or persona was. But she was also typecast. Like, she tried to play more dramatic roles. She wanted to play more real roles, and they just wouldn't put her. They were even giving her the chance. Right. And I do think that, you know, it shouldn't matter. It shouldn't matter, but it does. And it's this interesting thing that I feel like we're navigating, and I've always navigated it. I know that you and I are very similar in this way too, of being like, okay, I'm sexy, and, you know, go to hell. Like, right? I don't know, like, and it shouldn't matter. Like, get to know us first. So, you know, when I was younger, I remember when I was like 12, when I just started developing, and all of a sudden, like, I was this tomboy, I was like an honors student, always all these things, and all of a sudden I became curvy, right? I was like, whoa, like, all of a sudden I had this body, and I was like, at first didn't know what to do with it, and I was scared, I was like ashamed, I was like getting all this attention all of a sudden from all the boys for that, where it was like, before it was like, because I was good at sports and I was smart and I was like funny and whatever. And all of a sudden I was like, and I started at the beginning wearing baggy sweatshirts and kind of hiding my body. And then I went from 6th grade into junior high, and I saw older girls that had figures like mine that were like owning it, right? They were like wearing they were badass and powerful and hot, and everyone, like, all these things. And I was like, wait a minute, like, I'm gonna have this body for the rest of my life. This body's a miracle. Like, I love my body, like everyone should, because we're literally walking, like, we're incredible machines, right? I mean, the way our brains are processed, the fact that we can even play pool is like mind-blowing to me, or a million other things that we do with hand-eye coordination, dexterity, all these types of stuff. So I was like, whoa, I was like, how could I possibly be ashamed of something that I was born with, right? And I know a lot of girls, I've actually talked to a lot of, you know, I have friends that are attractive, and they started getting attention as young girls. They maybe got sexually harassed, or maybe even worse things would happen. And a lot of them have confided in me that they started gaining weight because they didn't like the attention. And that they didn't feel comfortable, they didn't know what to do, and they just wanted to hide, and they didn't, you know, and that is heartbreaking to me. And I think there's a lot more women out there that are like that, you know, or just dress a certain way or hide themselves because they don't want sexual attention. But I say we have to do the opposite. Like, that's a big reason why I own it. Because screw you. Like, if you can't handle my power and my sexiness, like, get away from me. I'm going to be who I am. And I think that most people can. It's just, of course it's intimidating and different. And I think that there's a level of jealousy that is silly. I think that's the worst part that comes from society, right? That's the power given to being attractive, right? Whereas it's just another thing. Like, it's just a quality that, like, a lot of people can't control, and it can be taken away. Like, if you don't take care of yourself, if something happens, like, I'm grateful every day. I think everyone should be grateful for their gifts and what they have in this world, and be, you know, and just be aware of them, right? And I think that is just, everyone has strengths and weaknesses, and, you know, attractive people, like, shouldn't be treated good or badly. I think it's just, you know.
Playing pool and skills are different than, they're separate. They should be treated separate.
I think so.
They
I think so,
they can
totally.
really be with one another, you know?
Yeah, and I just think that like people, there should be a level of respect amongst humans. Like I just, you know, I will say that I feel like I get judged for being, you know, attractive or owning my sexuality, and people expect me to be a certain way, you know, and how I act because, again, of society, right? But I think that every person should get the chance to know another person and give them the benefit of the doubt that they're a good person, that they like have value, that they're intelligent, that they are skilled, that they're all these things, instead of like judging them. Like, of course, it's like you can't judge a book by its cover type of thing. I'm such a firm believer in just like kindness and just not judging other people at all. I mean, of course there's like judgments, and we like, you know, we can't like, we pretend like human nature, like we're not going to, you know, judge people that like at a basis, as a basic level. But you know, whether you're gay, straight, transgender, like in any category known to man, like I accept you and love you and respect you as a human, right? So I feel like I've been judged recently for being more feminine, because a big part of this the feminist movement is you shouldn't be sexy. Like, you don't need to be sexy, right? But there's some people that it's not like, they're not putting on an act, or being, you know, let me be myself. Like, if you do you, I do me. Let's just all be on this planet together and do our thing, right? Like, so I like, that's so important. I think that's like the biggest important message for the show. Like, I want in a man's world, I wanted people to see that there was this bias, that a lot of times men do treat women differently if they're doing a male-dominated activity, right? And if they're attractive while doing it, then that can happen too. But the biggest thing was that they're not bad people. It's, let's just be like better people, everybody, right? I think that's the biggest thing of all, and that's the message that should be happening, whether it's Black Lives Matter, whether it's wearing masks and being respectful, whether it's, you know, like supporting veterans or people that are less fortunate than you know, whatever it is, like stay positive and treat humans, you know, like you would want to be treated.
Right. Good points. So you mentioned that you signed up for did you say the US Open?
Yes.
That's interesting. The US Open used to allow women, and then when the IPT came along, which was one of the first pro tours that officially allowed men and women to play, that was the same year where the US Open suddenly decided to not let women play. And Barry Berman made a statement to the public that said, I had men players say they're going to commit suicide if they were beaten by a woman, so now I'm not going to let women play.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Wow, I remember, now that you're saying that, I remember it happening vaguely. I do not remember Barry's quote or what he said, but
yeah,
I could see Barry, rest in peace. I knew Barry, you know, just a little bit from tournaments at his pool room. But I could kind of see him saying something like that, just because he was definitely old school.
right.
And I think, you know, and I think, you know, I think like it's really hard to bridge the gap, right, between the old generation and the new generation, right?
Yeah.
And you can't cater too much either way. But obviously, now, you know, the US Open is an open, right? That's like what it should be, is men or women. So that's definitely back. I know that it had changed before too, but you know, we need to move into the future, right, with equality.
Sure.
And what that means in a big way is kind of standing up to the older generation that might not want things to change.
Right.
Right? Change is scary. And I've struggled being on the WPBA and struggled with different a certain mentality that might be a little bit of an older way of thinking. And I think it's been changing. The new board of directors is definitely seems more open-minded to.
It's all new people. I think board now. Yeah, it's changed a couple times, I think.
Yeah. I think that the new board has a lot of women on it that are really supportive of change.
Wait, but you are on the board right now, or you're not?
Oh, I'm not on the board anymore.
Oh, okay.
I was on the board. I was in the board of the Women's Professional Billiard Association for a short time a couple years ago.
Okay.
And I was doing their social media. And then I left on good terms, but we had different opinions on certain things. And I felt like it wasn't a good fit. I love the women's tour, the WBA. I have been, I've been connected to it for like 20 years, almost 20 years, because I was like, trying to qualify, and it was my dream. And now I've been a touring pro for 10 years. But I do feel like they've been around since the late 70s, and they've catered for a long time to the older generation of player and of fans, right? As opposed to trying to see what they could change, right? Trying to get more youth involved and younger players, up-and-coming players, trying to branch out into more mainstream marketing type of stuff. And I think that they've been making progress recently with the new board.
Right. Now there's like a second or another women's professional tour called the NAPT. Do you play on that also, or is that allowed? Or
So the NAPT, I want to say started maybe 4 or 5 years ago, and I did play in maybe 3 of their events, but it got to a point where there was some headbutting and some issues between the WPBA and the NAPT. And I basically had to make a decision. I chose to support the WPBA, and as a top 16 player or an exempt player, that it was important for them to be a little strict. So they started to make rules where we couldn't play in their tour. And that's a controversial topic also.
NAPT did, or the WPBA did?
WPBA did.
Oh, okay.
Because the NAPT was coming along as a different pro tour, and of course the WPBA needed to support its brand, or like protect its brand. Right. So the brand, basically, a lot of it is the top players, or that's a big reason why we get the casino contracts and the money that we do. So all of a sudden, if the players can play in the other events, it started to get a little tricky.
Yeah,
right. So I chose solidarity with the WPBA, although I think that the whole topic is difficult, right? On one hand, I understand, especially lower ranked players, I think they should be able to play in whatever. Also, there's something to be said for like business and competition, right? So if a new tour comes along, shouldn't you want to improve your product, right? Improve your tour and just be like, our tour is better. But at the same time, we're under contract as professionals, right? And that's with any really major sport, because, you can't have one of your stars just being like, I'm going to go do this now and be all over the place. But if a tour, then the WPA, it's such tricky.
But if you had both of them, right, and that would just give everybody twice as many things to play in, and actually make it viable to maybe make a living playing pool.
Yes. See, now that's the other thing. Like that's I think why pool is such a unique position, because of course, like an NBA player or you know, if you're going to be on a professional tour, these players are making a living, right? There's enough event. There's like a full tour calendar. They get salaries. Like there's no hustle there, right? Whereas the WPBA, especially the last few years, you know, maybe only has a handful of events. And then you're paying all your expenses. Then you have to cash. And even then, you're really not making a living like we used to in the 90s and early 2000s.
Right.
So it's, the argument is like they're trying to rebuild the brand, right, and make it stronger. But if there's another competing tour and then those players are, let's say there's a scheduling conflict or anything, there's so many layers, right? And my opinion is that the lower players should be able to do whatever they want, right? If you're not making money, right? If you're not an exempt pro, top 16 get invites to all events, right? Yeah. Actually, I think it's top 32 is technically exempt, but top 16 we get buys. It's all these things. If you're not, I think that those people are the ones that should be under contract. Because when I was an up and comer, right? If you're trying to get better at pool, you need to constantly in competition, right? Right. So when I was trying to qualify in like the early 2000s, the WPBA, the Pro Tour was so strong. The regional tour system was so strong. Like I could constantly be in competition, right? Mm-hmm. Whereas now it's not the case. So you should be able to play. And again, like you said, make a livelihood. There's between the NAPT and the WPBA, you would have a full calendar. You would have a great calendar.
Yeah. So basically like the message is as a team, that is how it could be a great.
Yeah, there is a lot of history between all, and I don't want to go too much into it.
Sure, no. Yeah.
Right, but I do think that I think it's a shame that they're more arguing, butting heads instead of trying to work together. The WPBA has tried to compromise with the NAPT, and they didn't like what happened, and then the NIPT vice versa. Unfortunately, politics, right? And politics are like a lot of the time just like BS that don't get us anywhere. You know, it's unfortunate. And I think for pool, I look at that as a big reason why pool has always been held back from moving into the mainstream. Right? You have all these a la carte tournaments and all these tournament directors, and they're like, this is my tour and this is my turn. These are my rules and I'm the best and I don't care what you do. But like, it's like they're trying to scrape pennies. Yes. Right? Instead of like trying to unify and be like, we need to have a universal set of rules, consistency, a governing body, the whole thing. Like, they are they're just like, oh, like these like rogue warriors that are like, and it doesn't, as no other sport operates like that. Right. Well, no other like really legitimate sport that's in the mainstream operates.
Well, the crazy thing about it is everybody would make more money and do better and have more fun if we did really work as a team, you know?
I agree. I do believe like an entity like Matchroom has the potential to take us to the next level. Yeah. Right. Because the more men's events they acquire, the bigger their calendar, then they can turn into like an NFL or something that's an NBA. You know, I think it's this unbelievable, gigantic, complicated topic that has been debated about forever with pool players of, you know, but how do we unify, right? And do women's and men's tournaments come together? Is there one governing body for all professional pool, right? Should we all just be playing together in one tour, not separate, right? Yeah. But I don't know what the answer is, but I do know that the people inside the pool world could be much more proactive, you know, about trying to unify. Right. Yeah. You know, I feel like there's a lot more, the egos are a lot bigger than in play and acting like they know best, then they should be reaching out to the public, right? They should be trying to figure out, like, it always blew my mind, right? That the WPPA didn't have like suggestion cards or like feedback cards. You'd be entered into a raffle. Like, what do you love about the tournament? What could we improve on? Like all of these things, because they just would act like, from a pool player standpoint, right? Jackie, you're a pool player. Like, we see things from a pool player's eyes, right? But like, for example, my aunt and uncle would come to my Michigan pro event every year because I live in Michigan. Right. And a few years in, they were really embarrassed that we were at lunch in between my matches. And they were like, so every time we're here, somebody asks us, and we don't even know, but what do the beads mean above the light? And I was like, face palm. Because they don't know, they're not pool players.
Yeah, right.
But so pool players were just like, well, obviously those are games, and obviously this is this, and you barely see our names. They don't know what the rules are. The MCs aren't explaining the rules. Like, we should be acting like people walk off the casino floor. Yes. They don't know anything about pool. We want to get them involved. Yes. We want them. So I suggested flip charts for the WPA when I was the board, and we started using those. And it says the race number, because I was like, guys, so we should literally start at the basics. And if you can get a whole governing body with like the rules, and everyone could be like, because I can't even tell you, I'm sure you have also encountered this, of bar players, everyone thinks that like it's bar rules, right? Of just like, ball in hand, like a foul is behind the line. And then you are what you make after the break or whatever.
You have to educate. If you want to grow the sport, you have to make it so that people can understand it if they happen to pass by, or if you're trying to get new people to watch, you have to actually talk to those new people.
Completely. Like,
yeah. They have no idea, you know what I mean?
Totally. Like, they should be, every like pool tournament director, every league operator, every major tour or event, right, should be literally trying to reevaluate and change things based on an amateur, like a non-pool player's eyes, right? What a non-pool player would see. And would this make sense? Like, imagine, if I'm not a pool player, would that make sense? Hell no. It wouldn't make sense, right? Or even just like the lingo we use or the rules we have or things like that. When you've been in this game for years and years and years, it becomes second nature to us. But if we're trying to grow the sport and get other people that do not understand pool to appreciate it and to know what the hell is going on, right? You need to have, number one, simplify, unify, consistency, like all of these things, and ask them, figure out what they like. I just, it's frustrating that, again, going back to that like kind of purist, elitist, intellectual mentality of pool, it's like, well, that's the game and this is how it's always been done, and they can just, if they don't like it, they don't have to watch. Then pool is gonna die, guys. Right? I know. Like, if we really just rely on old school in the game, right, then it's not, the new generation isn't going to be into it.
Right.
They're not going to know what's happening.
Well, I mean, like when I first moved from Denver to a small town in California, there weren't that many players, and the players that were there didn't really understand the rules, or the real rules or league rules. So teaching was a huge link to the growth of the sport and educating people, and always keeping in mind that you're talking to people, or you could be talking to people that might not understand the lingo, and it's a very interesting game, so you have to keep that in mind when you're speaking about it or explaining it, or it just makes it more interesting. It grows the sport.
Totally.
Support, that's what gives the money to pool and brings more money to the game, are the new players. Just like anything, that's who buys most of the products and all that.
Really? Yeah. I think it's important that, pool just keeps trying to move out of the old school pool mentality and into the new, like a modern, fresh perspective. Like, I think the whole sport needs a makeover, rebranding. Right? I think, it breaks my heart. It breaks my heart that it's such an amazing game, right? It takes a lifetime to be a master. It takes so much hard work and years. It's a fun game. It's a social game. Like, it's obviously gigantic amongst the average people and amateurs and bars and all of these things. But for some reason, the sport can't get their act together and come together, pull together. I like that term of this like double entendre of like pool needs to pull together to to take it to the next level, right? Or to not even I'm sorry, but I think to take it to the next level, but to keep it alive, because we're in danger. We need to be honest about the way that technology and social media and everything has impacted this new generation, right? The younger generation has a shorter attention span. They're used to not, really like being like on a screen. And pool requires a lot of practice and attention to detail and learning, right? It's a lot of commitment. But if you just keep it, it can be just like, you keep people in it and having fun, right? And learning, I think it has so much to offer the new generation and humanity. Just like, of just like helping people to connect with one another, because it's social, to connect in the moment because of the tension that pool is needed. All of these things are just so good. But if we don't like recognize that this new generation is different, or just so obviously every generation, evolves or transforms or is like different than the previous, right? That who knows what's going to happen. I mean, it's all about the youth. I think, inspiring kids, which is why I think that the biggest things for me to do, pool needs to be on TV, right? Whether it's the reality shows, like all the shows I did, from the Hustlers to In a Man's World to, be in the Harry Connick Jr. show or the Today Show, like to have pool, like people see like an energetic, excited, professional, it gets kids excited, right? And the most rewarding thing for me is when my shows are like, we watched it together as a family, and my little girls want to be pool players now, right? And they come up to me and I'm like, I watched you on The Hustler. Can I have your autograph? And now they're interested in playing pool, right? So going back to the very beginning of this interview or this conversation is like, if you need the big personalities, right? You need the people that the kids can connect with, right? To make it cool and fun, so that people want to do it. Right. So if you only be like, well, you're not a champion, you haven't won a world title, then you can't represent the sport, right? That's lunacy, because those world champions don't want to be in the limelight anyway. They don't want to be, right? They don't want to be like front and center.
Right. It needs to be a mixture of entertaining, interesting, and educational all at the same time.
Completely agree with that. Yeah. So I think a really big step in the right direction, which I don't know how it hasn't been done yet, is getting pool in schools, right? Yeah. Because pool is geometry, physics, math, it's physical, it's social, it's everything. You could completely create a curriculum, right? So you can get bowling credits. I remember I took I
actually have a curriculum for it, and I went 2 years of meetings in California with one of the colleges there, and then at the very last minute they changed the vice president, who didn't understand pool at all, and was just kind of like, no, and then 2 years of work just out the window.
Oh, that's such a shame.
It's a shame.
Yeah, like
just because they don't understand, they don't understand.
And I think that, like, I'm in New York, and I have connections of friends who are connected to the school system here, and even with the connection, it's like the process of what you did is so important, but it's so hard, so time consuming, right? And you're trying to sell this thing that if people don't understand the value of pool, right, a lot of people still go back to the hustler and like the gambling and the studiness and drinking, when it's so much more than that, right? It's so much bigger than that.
Yeah, and there's so many valuable about it, a game as a whole. Like, it's crazy that bowling is in colleges and they get 4 credits, and pool, a lot of people look at it like you're just making one ball in the pocket, but really it's dividing spheres, and you're introducing so many different elements about spin and physics and geometry and concentration and
Totally.
so much.
I think, it really needs to start in high schools, and it's like kind of a no-brainer, right? But I think that, again, like without the governing body, right? So it's like I grew up playing a lot of sports, and one of my biggest was probably softball, right? And I played tournament ball, right? So it's like, you start at Little League, right? I started playing organized softball when I was 9, right? And started competing, and then started playing travel ball, and I played in high school, and I didn't go on to play in college because I started competing in pool, but there's nothing like that for pool, right? So it's like Little League, there's soccer Little League, there's like all these things, but there is, the like Billiard Education Foundation, right? There is APA juniors. There are some isolated things, but there's no consistent curriculum. There's no governing body. I think like if pool's ever going to really advance, that's the key, is to get it, is to have our youth playing it and understand the value of it. Other countries do, right? Other countries, that's why, Asia, they start training their champions at like 10 or 11 years old. Mm-hmm. They take them out, they're coaching, it is obviously, it's such an intellectual game. So of course it should be in schools. But you're right, a lot of this, like the misconception, right, is just, and the way pool has been portrayed in America. You have the hustler, the color of money, and of course, that's a cool side of pool, right? That's a fun side of pool. Like I was in a show with the hustlers. Like, that's fun. Yeah. It's a part of our history, but there's a huge other side of pool that's educational. Yeah. Right? That is not being utilized at all.
A lot of educational elements and.
Yeah. So I think it's so hard though, and that's, where does it start, and where do you but I think that if it can be started and it can be reproduced, mm-hmm. right? You get a curriculum in one school and you get a really solid, and then other professionals start it in their areas of the country, and you can connect it, right? That could have a lot of potential.
Right. Let's make billiards great again. Love you, Emily.
Love you, baby.